I'm Mike. I saw Ding shut down when they tried to shut it down. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I was wondering because everybody's just like, okay, don't worry. I do weird things. It's okay. I just do weird things on purpose. Let's try that again because I feel like it needs a little more umph. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, now we're awake and rolling. Look, I need you to go ahead and take out your calendars and mark down Saturday the 27th. June 27th. It's a Saturday. You're not going to want to miss it, especially if you've been a part of community church for any length of time. As I talk, if it sounds like I got something in my mouth, I do. Welcome to continued allergy season. So if you want to be able to hear me throughout the rest of it, I got to suck on one of these. So just ignore the lozenge in the cheek. It's not dip, I swear. I haven't gone to Zen patches yet, but maybe. We'll see. But look, June 27th is a Saturday. The time is 12 noon to 2:30 p.m. It's going to be a floating event, and we are doing a salute to Roger Worley. He reaches 80 years old this year, or I should say 80 years young, because if y'all know Roger Worley and Harry Junker, they share a same birth year, so Harry will be later this year. Those men put me to shame, and they just keep trucking along, but we wanted to kind of celebrate Roger as some things are shifting. He's still going to be discipling men in our community and with our church. He's still part of the church family, but we wanted to bring you along with us so we can celebrate him and give him a thanks for all he's done the many, many years he has been a part of this church. And I know I am not the only one who would be able to testify the impact Roger has had on us. So come celebrate Roger on the 27th. Also, we've been telling you about the mission trip to Montana. Some of you have been kind of thinking about it, praying about it, asking about it. If you'll just let me know by the end of the month, we'll get a team together and then we'll get the logistics worked out. It's for the week of August the 17th, and we're going to go serve Camp Lutana. We've been there before. They were gracious hosts. They asked us to come back and give them a hand, specifically to help rebuild a boys' bathhouse. So they were ready for the following 2027 camp year. So we'll be coming right as soon as camp ends for them. And we're going to rush in and help them with the build, do some other chores, get them ready for winter. Winter comes early in Montana up there, and get them ready to survive the winter and be ready to host campers next year. So you're not going to want to miss it. It's one of the cheapest, easiest ways to do a mission trip we've experienced, because all it's going to take is basically the cost of a plane ticket. All right, that's all I got for announcements. Let's go ahead and dive into what we're talking about today. Am I good, Tanner? We're good on that? Cool. Hey, what's up, online people? I haven't yelled at you in a while, so in a good way, holla at your boy. So we have plenty of people. I actually got to meet somebody. I was at a wedding I was asked to officiate for, and they came up to me like, hey, you're the dude on YouTube. And I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah, we watch you online. I'm like, this is weird. I'm not that famous, but it was cool to meet them. So if you're watching, thanks again for reaching out, and keep watching. We love to have you join us. All right, so we're continuing our study through the book of Ephesians, and we're going to still be in chapter 4 today. So if you want to follow along with your Bible or device, go ahead and turn to Ephesians chapter 4, find your place. But we're going to start today by looking at something totally different. Now, you guys are not new to this. I've done this kind of pivot on you before, so you're pros at this. This won't throw you off. But I want us to rewind time a little bit and leave the first century church and go back to the Old Testament. And I want us to look at a few events happening in the Old Testament because I feel like they're going to frame a lot of what we discuss today. So I want to start with I would say the story of Gideon, but let me just go ahead and clarify. If we say story of and talking about the Old Testament, this is not fantasy or fiction or fairy tale. These are real historical events that really happened. So we're going to start with the life of Gideon. And so we're going to find ourselves in the book of Judges. Now, if you want to follow along in this, you can. We'll be in Judges chapter 6. But if you just want to go ahead and find your place in Ephesians and then just listen to me tell this, that's fine too. It'll be on the screen behind us. But in the life of Gideon, where we're picking up today, we're picking up where Gideon has been called by God to lead the army of Israel against their enemies. And so this event takes place between that call and the famous, if I put the fleece out, it's dry, ground wet, ground dry, it's wet test that he did to God. Before that, in between the two is a not often told story of Gideon's life, something he did in between those two events. And so let me just show you in Judges chapter 6, starting verse 25, we get this. That night the Lord said to Gideon, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old, pull down your father's altar to Baal, and cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it. Then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary, laying the stones carefully. Sacrifice the bull as a burnt offering on the altar, using as fuel the wood of the Asherah pole you cut down. Y'all talk about a flex. God's like, hey, these are false gods you're worshiping. Tear down those relics they're worshiping and use that to set a fire and worship me. So God's really flexing on these false gods. Verse 27, so Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded, but he did it at night because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the people of the town. Makes sense. Verse 28, early the next morning, time to find out. As the people of the town began to stir, someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. In their place, a new altar had been built, and on it were the remains of the bull that had been sacrificed. The people said to each other, who did this? And after asking around and making a careful search, they learned it was Gideon, son of Joash. Bring out your son, the men of the town demanded of Joash. He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and for cutting down the Asherah pole. Now Joash he's got a pickle to decide what he's going to do with. Well, let's see what he does. Verse 31, but Joash shouted to the crowd that confronted him, why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Whoever pleads his case will be put to death by morning. If Baal truly is a god, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down his altar. From then on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal defend himself, because he broke down Baal's altar. That may not pump you up, but if you know the history, that's pretty great. It's really cool. It's like a night ops thing going on, like that. Look, you got to understand how I interpret Old Testament. It's real, and my American male brain likes to find the night op stuff. There's plenty of them. I'm not going to get a rabbit trail on that today. So I see that. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So Gideon heard God's call to obey, and he goes and tears down idols, and not just any old idol. It's the one of his father. So it's like Luke versus Vader. Luke, I am your father. He's like, I know, but I killed your altar. So what you going to do about it? So it's a gutsy move to go up against his dad to be obedient to God. But here's the problem. The tension comes to a climax when the town finds out about the vandalism. They're pretty upset about it. And so now Gideon's dad has to make a decision. Does he turn on his son for destroying his idols that the town uses? Or does he defend his son and in doing so take a stance for God? Thankfully, Gideon's dad chose the latter. Now pause on that, because now we're going to look at another event, and this time in the book of 1 Kings. And y'all, it's happened in Judges, it happens in Kings, time and time again. If you've studied the Old Testament, you know the story. Tale as old as time. Things will be going great until they're not. And then there'll be wicked kings or wicked leaders, and the people of the land do whatever they want to do. They leave God and they start worshiping idols. And this is put on repeat until God calls them out of it. A leader comes in, brings them back, and then it just repeats, rinse and repeat over and over. And so we see this playing out in 1 Kings. And there's a line of wicked kings in both Israel and Judah. And why do I mention it that way? Because at this point in history, the nation of Israel has divided into two kingdoms, Israel and Judah. They've been at war and opposing each other. It's a civil war of sorts. And so still God's people, they're just kind of against each other. And these two rival nations both have evil kings doing evil things. And so this is where we're going to pick up. Let's get a little backstory by looking at 1 Kings chapter 14. So 1 Kings 14 says this, verse 22, during Rehoboam's reign, the people of Judah did what was evil in the Lord's sight, provoking his anger with their sin, for it was even worse than that of their ancestors. So they're not only doing evil, but they get the caveat, it was worse than their ancestors. So we're in some bad times, y'all. Verse 23, for they also built for themselves pagan shrines and set up sacred pillars and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every green tree. And it's about to spell it out. Verse 24, there were even male and female shrine prostitutes throughout the land. The people imitated the detestable practices of the pagan nations the Lord had driven from the land ahead of the Israelites. Pretty rough stuff, but the bad news is it doesn't just stop there. It keeps going. So now we jump over to 1 Kings chapter 15. It says this, starting in verse 1, Abijam began to rule over Judah in the 8th year of Jeroboam's reign in Israel. So Abijam is the son of Rehoboam. And it says he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother was Maacah, the granddaughter of Absalom. I'm probably butchering those names. So if you speak Hebrew, I apologize. Or if you know biblical context, this is the best this boy from the south can do. Verse 3, he committed the same sins as his father before him, and he was not faithful to the Lord his God as his ancestors David had been. So like father, like son, rinse and repeat, remember? So things are not looking great for the people of Israel, but we get a break in the flow of evil in verse 8. Because then we get this, when Abijam died, he was buried in the city of David, then his son Asa became the next king. Okay, what's King Asa going to do? Verse 11, Asa did what was pleasing to the Lord's sight. As his ancestor David had done, he banished the male and female shrine prostitutes from the land and got rid of all the idols his ancestors had made. This is key. He even deposed his grandmother Maacah from her position as queen mother because she had made an obscene Asherah pole. He cut down her obscene pole and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although the pagan shrines were not removed, Asa's heart remained completely faithful to the Lord throughout his life. Talk about breaking generational curses. King Asa did what was necessary to take the land back for the Lord. And that included throwing out his own grandmother. Y'all, there's pressure and then there's family pressure. And you know the difference. We can deal with some regular pressure for most of our life, but you let family pressure build up for any length of time, we end up caving. Y'all know it's true. If you don't believe me, then why then can you not tell your great aunt Gertrude that itchy wool sweater she gets you every year, one, is not still in fashion, and two, breaks you out in hives? But you don't. What do? Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you for the gift. Thank you, great Aunt Gertrude. And then you shove it in your closet because you can't tell her the truth, right? Or maybe it's that time you mentioned to your wife's mother one time, hey, this is an amazing recipe. You really knocked it out of the park. And then for her, it just clicks. Hey, this is his favorite thing. And so now for the rest of your life, every time you show up, she makes that favorite thing, but you don't have the heart to tell her, look, I can't eat any more of it. I'm so sick and tired of it. That's all I've eaten every time I see you, that I'd rather eat dirt than that, but you just shove it down with a smile on your face because you're not going to tell family there's an issue. Look, I can rag on family issues all day. The point remains, this was not an easy decision, but he did it because King Asa took whatever measure was necessary to rid the land of this evil, to purge it, so that he could point the nation's sight back to God. And look, for the sake of keeping it PG here, and I could take it R-rated real fast and be historically accurate, so we're not going to. But just to keep it PG, I'm not going to get into the details. But you should be able to put your pieces together. We're adults here. So there's male and female shrine prostitutes, okay? And not only was it called an Asherah pole, his grandmother's was particularly called an obscene one. Oh, and Asherah was the goddess of fertility. So you put the math together. This is some pretty obscene stuff happening all around him. And so this is more than just yard decorations, folks. There's actual wickedness happening. And so he's like, I got to take care of this. And so in Gideon and Asa, we see two instances of when someone loved God more than they loved their circumstances. And so they decided to take a stand specifically to purge idolatry. That's the key. Purging idolatry, the idolatry that was corrupting the hearts of the people. So remember that, because now we jump to Ephesians 4, and we're going to hang on to idolatry, because eventually we'll see how that affects us. So we're going to go back to what we read last week. No new text. We're going to look at the same text as last week because we're not ready to move on. Y'all might be ready to move on, but God's not ready for us to move on because there's still a lot in these verses to unpack. A lot of truths that if we were to pass them by, we would be remiss for doing so. In fact, unless the Spirit shifts the direction we take in the next few weeks, I see us being here for the next few weeks as well. So let's look again at Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 24. We get this: put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. So stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we all are parts of the same body. And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. If you're a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good hard work, and then give generously to others in need. Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. And do not bring sorrow to God's Holy Spirit by the way you live. Remember, He has identified you as His own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. And yes, some of that is repeat. But the reason we want to look at it as a section is, if you remember, look back at verse 24, it sets the stage for this passage. Verse 24 tells us this: but put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. So all the verses following that show us what we're studying now is how that is played out. Last week we looked at things like don't lie, and more specifically, don't give in to sinful anger. Neither one of those actions are a reflection of your new nature. Instead, if you're lying or giving in to sinful nature or sinful anger, rather, it's a reflection of your old sinful nature having full reign of your life. And so in the same manner, we pick up in the very next verse after we stopped last week. And let me just go ahead and say, if you're trying to figure out how idolatry and this passage work together, don't worry, I'll get you there. Just hang on tight. That's our end goal. But let's look at today at verse 28. That's where we're parking for the rest of today. Verse 28. So let's look at it again. If you are a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good hard work, and then give generously to others in need. Well, it's not what you think immediately. Because you're like, uh-oh, who stole? So Pastor Ben's out here harping on some stealing. So who's been doing some stealing? That's not what we're talking about. This isn't a Sunday where I tell you to stop stealing. Because one, that should be obvious. Like, don't steal. Come on, guys. And two, look, it's illegal anyway. So why would you do it? So that's obvious, right? But what's not obvious is some of that is still happening below the surface, though we don't realize it. Oh, and let me go ahead and just shatter expectations, give you a spoiler alert. Today's topic, it's money. We're talking about money. All right, I know everyone just got a little nervous. Don't worry, your nerves will pass. Look, let me just tell you, one thing I appreciate working out with coaches, even if it's a video workout and it's an online coach, coaches have this ability to speak these metaphors into your life when you need them most to help motivate you. Like when you're dying, ready to give up, you're drenched in sweat. Y'all, let me just tell you, it's bad in a workout when you're in the push-up position and look down and your floor, it looks like someone spilled water, but it's just because it's dripping off of you. Don't ask me how I know. It might ruin your lunch. But you're in the middle, you're ready to give up, you're dying, you're like, I can't do anymore. And then in that moment of despair, your coach drops a bomb like this. Oh, that's not sweat, that's just your fat crying as you burn it away. Or, yeah, that burn you feel in your muscles, that's just pain leaving pain is just weakness leaving the body. And I don't know how they do it, man. It's some kind of psyop technique they learned from the CIA. Because they say those things to you and you're like, you know what? Yeah, fat. Cry some more for me, fat. Let's get you out of here, fat. Let's go. Yeah, I don't want weakness. Yeah, let's embrace that pain. That's weakness leaving the body. And you just keep going. So I say that to say this. If you're getting a little nervous, maybe you're sweating a little bit because the topic's money, it's okay. That's just your old mindset crying as you burn it away, just like the fat leaving your body. Hang on for the ride today because I think it's going to be worth it for you. Because here's the problem. For too long, Either churches only brought up money if giving was down and they had to do whatever they could to bump giving up. And let me make it clear, we do fully appreciate all you guys do to give. You beat the national average by a long shot. Our church has been notorious for being a giving church. So we thank you, because we're only able to do what we do because of your generosity. But more often than not, if a church talks about money, it's because they're trying to either raise funds or bump up giving. So either they'll do that, or the opposite, they just won't talk about it at all. They'll avoid it. Like, it's kind of like politics. You don't talk about money and politics from the pulpit and everybody's happy. And so people are like, let's just skip the money section and keep going. But look, today's not about raising funds. Yeah, we're raising funds for the new church building. And it's not about giving to the church. Both of those might be a downriver, like, something that comes from today, but it's not the point of today. What we're really needing to do is a deep dive here in Ephesians, the letter to the church of Ephesus, because I believe what we find today is a truth that will redefine something we all have believed is truth, so that we can replace our misunderstanding with the actual truth found in God's word. And that's why it's necessary today. And it's a truth that has the ability to impact us down to our day-to-day life decisions. This isn't some like generic pray more. This has a deeper impact than just even that. Now, the reason people, I'm not saying you, I'm just humans as a whole. The reason most people struggle when we preach on things like money and sex and our other lifestyle choices is because whenever the church teaches on those things, we as humans push back because we feel like they're stepping into our autonomy. Like, whoa, man. No. Like, if someone preaches don't lie, well, makes sense, all right? Like, that's 10 Commandments. Okay, I can get over that one. Or like I said, don't steal. Well, that's not a hard one. It's illegal to steal in the first place, so like, preach on, Pastor, let's go. Or if I was just like this generic, you know what, have a better spiritual life, we just need to pray more. We'd be like, yeah. And we'd feel like we're in a philosophy class, and we'd all leave just feeling a little more spiritual. But when we get into the nitty gritty, and we preach on these things that kind of step into the zone, to the things that we hold close to our hearts, for whatever reason, we as humans push back. We fight back at that. But just like pain is weakness leaving the body, the uncomfortable feeling a person has when they are confronted with the truth, the word of God, is just the old man trying desperately not to be put to death for good. Now, one key context before we continue. What we talk about today, it only applies to a true Christ follower. Someone who has actually experienced the new birth. Because if someone hearing this today is an unbeliever, or there's someone who believes they have something that they don't, they've never actually experienced the new birth, then the two of them, they're not changed. There is no new life. There's no heart change there. So this isn't going to really apply to them. But for those of us who are in Christ, we know we are no longer who we used to be. We have been made new. That's 2 Corinthians 5:17. The old is gone, the new has come. So, if we feel something today, at any point, fighting against the teaching of Scripture, just know that's just your old mindset fighting back. The Bible told us the old is gone. And so the best way to understand why it still fights back, even though it's supposed to be gone, is an improper, incomplete example, but the best I can come up with is phantom limb syndrome. The phenomenon where someone loses a limb, yet years later they can still feel pain or sensations from the missing limb. That's kind of what happens to us. We've been made new. Our spirits are made new, but there's still an echo there of who we used to be. There's still some mindset that hasn't fully been brought into alignment with God. And on top of that, look, we're trapped in a physical self tainted by the sin curse. That's why Paul in the book of Romans says, I do the things I don't want to do, and I don't do the things I know I should do. He says, why is that the case? And he says the answer is because the sin in me. So we know we fight that. And we also know from scriptures that the only reason we face temptation is because it stems from our own selfish desires. So the echo is real. And so we have to decide to put it to death on a daily basis. It's what old school Bible teachers would call mortifying the flesh. You may have heard that term. Meaning we have to conquer our desires, put it into submission at the foot of the cross. That's why we get things like take every thought captive. Now, I know this is a long side note, but here's one last thing on it. If you want to find out practically what mortifying the flesh really means, just to take your selfish physical desires and bring them into submission at the foot of the cross, if you want a practical way to practice that, I would tell you learn the art of prayer and fasting, especially for extended periods. And I'm not talking, well, I didn't look at my phone for 15 minutes. Well, that's great. That's not a fast. I'm talking about days of just water for sustenance. You spend the time in prayer, and you do not allow yourself to give into the appetites your body has. Now let me tell you, when you start, the first little bit, you're like, no big deal. I got this. Well, yeah, it's just because your body's not ready for lunch yet. Lunch comes, you're like, okay, this is a little hard, but I got this. By day 3, a cheeseburger has never smelled so good, I promise you. And it becomes a real burden to put to death the thoughts and desires of the flesh in order to subdue them to Christ, to commit yourself to a time of prayer. So if you want to learn that, try that. Look, I've gone 7 days a couple of times. That's the max I've gone, and I'm not ragging on me, thinking I'm cool. I know people who have gone 40 days multiple times in their life. Your boy ain't one of them yet. Maybe one day God will bring me that kind of discipline. But let me just tell you, from the short time I have done it, you learn a new lifestyle, a new discipline. Your mindset starts to shift. So, all that to say this, let's go back to the passage today. When we look at the verse, we ask ourselves, how is this about money? And then, how does it apply to us in light of putting on our new nature? Why do I need to learn to mortify the flesh? Why do I need to put my own desires aside? What is really going on? Well, let's look at it again because I think it will give some context to us. Verse 28 of Ephesians 4, one more time. If you are a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good hard work and then give generously to others in needs. So let's cover some basics. Let's just walk our way through it until we discover what is the deeper truth there. So it says, don't steal. Instead, use your hands for hard work. Cool. Makes sense. Basically, it says, earn what you make. Meaning, don't profit off the hard work of other people. And if we're honest, that's kind of the definition of stealing. Taking something that somebody else earned. So, still not seeing it. Well, let's look at the second half. Because it's the second half that puts this whole verse into the light of truth. Because then it says, give generously to others in need. Why would Paul put that? How does giving generously go with stealing? Like, what's going on, Paul? That understanding of giving generously puts everything into context. You see, the reality is this, church. We as humans, too often, we consider our finances as something we have earned. It said, don't steal, earn it with good hard work. So we think, this is something I've earned, and then we take it, and we figure out how to leverage our earnings to improve our lives. I mean, we can all, that's capitalism at its finest, right? And so we often do that increasing or improving our lives through the purchase of food, clothing, shelter, and any other goods we either need or want. That's just normal consumerism. It's just life. But if we think about it, by thinking of it in the terms of this is my money, so what is my choice on how to use it, we have to ask ourselves, so once again, where does generosity play a role in this? Why would Paul put be generous? How does that play a role? You see, by focusing on the idea of generosity, it reveals to us a hidden truth that we have lost touch on what the reality is for what our finances actually mean for us. Let me spell some stuff out, some truths. It's been reported that many Americans spend 110% of their income. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to do that math. Houston, we got trouble. You may not feel it right away, but pretty quickly, you're going to be in a hole you can't get out of. And if you don't stop something, that hole just gets deeper. If you don't change, you're in trouble if you're spending more than you take in. That's just basic math. But it's why we see things like credit card debt being so rampant. In fact, other studies report that as many as up to 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That's eye-opening. Now, for some of us, it's just our station of life. Things have gotten expensive. Gas is expensive. The housing market, like y'all, Davidson County just reassessed everybody's taxes, and we're like, whoa, what's going on? That's not the house I built. So I get it. Look, I'm in ministry. I get it. I'm not getting rich off of this. I promise you that. Now, for some others, though, they don't have to. They just make choices that ends up having them live paycheck to paycheck. But whether it's by choices or circumstances, reports show that at least 50% of Americans live that way these days. And like I said, I get it. So when we look at what we take in and we see this long line of people who demand a slice of our pie, it gets hard to regulate, and it gets even harder to remember the truth of our finances. And here's the truth. It's not ours to begin with anyway. What do you mean? Let me show you. If we walked out today and some random dude dressed in a Santa costume, we'd be leery, don't worry. But if he checked out and he's like, hey, I'm just here to give gifts, and he had bought like a bunch of lottery tickets, and he said, I just want to give everybody a lottery ticket just in case. Okay. Because that way I take away, well, I don't play lottery. Cool. On this one, you didn't have to. Someone gave it to you. And so you go home and you're like, well, might as well check it. And you realize you got the winning numbers. And I'm not talking about like you won $2. I'm talking about like whatever Powerball is at now, a couple of 100 million, like life-changing, I don't know what to do next kind of money. So now you have a winning lottery ticket. And so they're like, well, do you want the annuity where they pay you a little bit at a time for like the next 1 billion years? You're like, no, because I can't guarantee that. Give me the cash payout so I can do with it as I want. Go ahead and invest it, those kind of things. Hopefully you would invest it. Hopefully, you know, whatever. So take the cash payout. You're like, you go to bed tonight and you're like, man, tomorrow everything changes. Life as we knew it is no more. We in the big games now, boys. And you're so excited and you never wake up. You die in your sleep. Do you know how much of that cash you get to keep with you? None. We don't get to take it with us. See, the reality is, it's not that it's ours, because if it was ours, we could take it with us. The reality is, we have been assigned as temporary stewards of something that is God's. It's God's resource. He has just allocated a portion of it to you to steward. And don't believe me, look at Psalm 24:1. It says this, the earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. The world and all its people belong to him. And you might argue, but I earned it. Okay, I get it. I get it, man. But think about it. Who gave you the ability, the opportunity, the resources, the drive? Who even determined that you would be born in this time period to be able to make that kind of money? Like, if we had been born in the midst of the Dust Bowl in the 20s and 30s, we ain't getting out of here rich, folks. Was it not the almighty sovereign king of the universe? You see, in 1929, there was a day called Black Tuesday. And a lot of people had their worlds change in an instant. That was the day Wall Street crashed. And when Wall Street crashed, it proved to us that we really aren't as secure in our finances as we like to believe. Because many people lost all in the blink of an eye. Think about this. The only reason we feel secure about our finances being in the bank is because in the banking industry, most banks we choose are federally insured, right? So if something goes wrong, government's going to back them up. Okay, what happens if we wake up tomorrow and the news is we've been invaded, the American government as we know it has been overthrown, and now we are the citizens of another foreign nation? You know what happens at that point? The almighty US dollar is now worthless, and everything we called wealth turns to ash. And this has happened in world history time and time again. At one point in 2008, this is recent, the country of Zimbabwe had an economic crisis. Their economy became destabilized, and it led to inflation at a soaring rate to the point where the citizens of Zimbabwe literally had to take wheelbarrows full of cash. Like, if we had a wheelbarrow full of dollar bills, we'd feel like Scrooge McDuck and we'd try to swim in it. They had to take wheelbarrows full of their currency to the grocery store to buy the necessities. That's how destabilized their economy happened overnight. So in reality, the truth is one banking error, one shift in global governance, and our day could be ruined for any of us. So the reality is, yes, we are called to be stewards of what God has given us. And look, I don't have the time to do an in-depth economics lesson today, but needless to say this, our money, our dollar bill, really all it is a representation of time spent in labor. And you take that representation in this paper form and you exchange it for goods and services. That's currency in a nutshell. And so what we get from this is, the truth is, in this life we are given 3 points of resources. We're given time, we're given talent, and we're given treasure. And so God says, I've given you all a measure of each. It's up to you to steward these resources the best you can for the glory of the kingdom. And if you want to see more in that, you would turn to Matthew 25. For time's sake, we're not going to look at it. I'll just recap it. But in Matthew 25, Jesus tells the parable of the 3 servants. In this parable, there's a master going away. He's going to be gone for a while. So he takes 3 servants. He says, I need you to run the books while I'm gone. And so he gives one servant a portion, the second servant a little bit less, and then the final servant a single portion. But they all have rationed out portions of this income. And he says, steward this, manage my household until I get back. He's gone for a while, and then he comes back, and he brings them in to report. And y'all know how it goes. The first one says, look, I did this, this, and this, and I made extra. I doubled it down for you. Here you go. The second one says, I did the same. I invested. I put it in the things that would grow. And so here, I've used these resources. I've doubled it for you. Here you go, sir. And the last one says, look, I just give you back what you gave me. I knew you were shrewd, and that if I messed it up, I'd be in trouble. So just to play it safe, I just stuck it down in a hole and hid it. Now that you're here, it's back. So here you go. And he says, what? If you had at least put it in the bank, you would earn interest. And so the first 2 get, well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into the glory of your master. The third gets cursed for his behavior. And that parable shows us that for those that take the resources God allocates to us and uses them wisely for the master, you get a well done, my good and faithful servant at the end. Let me just spell it out for you. This is why tithing exists. There's other nuances, like God designed it to set up like how the ministry functions, because we don't sell a thing. But at the base, that's the reality of the tithe. It's what we call the first 10%, your first and best. And the tithing exists because God says, I've given you 100. Do you trust me enough with the 90 to give me back 10? Now, some people fight at the idea of the tithe. I get it. And they're like, well, the tithe was just part of the Old Testament system of law. Okay. But before the law, Abraham gave a tithe to the priest Melchizedek. Before Abraham, Abel took the first and best of his flock and offered it to God. So sacrifice to God or giving back to God has been a reality since the beginning. But the reality is this, the tithe, what we call that 10%, that first 10%, really the way we should look at it is that should be at minimum the baseline of our giving. And if you want to argue the semantics of Old Testament giving versus New Testament giving, fine. Let me just say, you probably don't want to try to keep up with the first century church. Okay? These guys, they got on fire so much that they looked at their resources and they sold excess land and homes. They were giving away major chunks of property so that they could liquidate them, bring it all to the church and say, give to the poor. In fact, it says they were also generous in this, that there was none among them with need. So yeah, that's a hard baseline to try to imitate. I get that. But get past the semantics and look at it. When we look at these resources, our time, because we all have a limited amount of time. It varies for each of us. Our talents and our resources. You see, the way we use those three resources shows us the things we truly value. And we really see that with our treasure. Look at what Jesus himself said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21. He said this, wherever your treasure is, what comes next, there the desires of your heart will be also. And y'all heard that verse growing up for all my life. And I never realized the nuance of that verse until just recently when I heard another pastor point it out. Because if you're honest, most of us think, okay, wherever my heart is, that's where I'm going to put my treasure. That's how we read it. It doesn't say that. It says, whatever you treasure leads your heart. So your treasure leads your heart. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So let's consider, just because this is what he used, the finances for a moment. Here's how we should think about it. So we look at what we're given and we say, all right, first things first, me and mine, I got to take care of my family. So I'm going to do the basics, the things to survive, like food, shelter, clothing. It's the basics. We can all agree on that, right? Makes common sense. Then we say, all right, I got some more left over. Let me be a good steward and save for times of hardship by putting some away. Okay, when things get hectic. That's in Proverbs. He said, consider the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. She stores up in the summer, so in the winter she has plenty. And so the practice of saving is a biblical thing. But we also know from Scripture we're to be generous with it. Because our mindset should not be, how can I leverage my finances to live the best life possible? Rather, it should be, how can I use what I have to help somebody else? Specifically, how can I help use it to further the kingdom, the spread of the gospel, each one reach one, make heaven crowded? How do I find a way to invest in the kingdom? Look, wake up to reality. Of all the things, if you look at your bank book, our money is the number one teller of where our heart's desire is, what we have made Lord of our lives. But the problem is, for most of us, I'm not just talking about you as a church, as humans, as believers, most of us have not done a really good job at leveraging our time, talent, and treasure. And so now we find ourselves in a pickle. Well, you know what? If that's you, that's okay. Step one is recognizing the problem. So if you recognize there's a problem, great. We can help you set a course to correct it. But we'll get to that later. But for many of us, though we might hear the truth this morning, we reject it with everything in us. And for some people, I'm not saying it's you, I've just heard it before, when you are confronted with a truth like this, we'll go as far as to tell ourselves a lie to make ourselves feel better. Oh, the only reason they're talking this way is because the church just wants my money. And we tell ourselves lies that way to justify our behaviors and attitude. We become resentful of this kind of teaching. Why? Because we are really confronting something deeply rooted in our souls. Because of all the things that we feel like influence us, it really boils down to one of two camps. And this is not unique to me. I heard another pastor say it this way. I'm just going to repeat it to you. It boils down to one of two things. Either you live your life in fear or you live your life in faith. Well, which one is it, Pastor? Well, it's a simple test. Look in your future. And when you think about what is coming in your future, if you think about your decisions and your circumstances being in control, you're in fear. But when you look to your future and you think it's okay no matter what may come my way, God's in control, then you're in faith. See, the reason fear controls us is because we ultimately are bowing down and worshiping at the throne of self. That's what it boils down to. We make every decision based on what's best for me and mine. We may do some generous things. We've all seen the sad commercial, "In the arms of an angel." Sarah McLachlan singing her heart out, and there's a sad puppy. And we all cry over the sad puppy. Even if you don't like puppies, they do a really good job of making you cry over this puppy. And so you may give a little bit to the sad puppy. And you're like, I was generous. No, you just are feeding your ego because you felt bad for a puppy. Because the truth is, the average American is generous with 1% of what they have. And that's in things like charities, charitable giving, like to churches, United Way. I've been there before, the pre-tax deduction, sad puppies. Of all the things, most Americans give away 1%. Well, it's all right, Pastor, we're Christians. Christians are better, right? Well, you are, right? We are better than the average. In fact, we double the national average, 2%. The average American Christian gives 2% away. That means for every $100 you have in your pocket, you're good enough to give somebody 2. Let that sink in. You see, the truth is, we buy things we see that we convince ourselves we need. It's the lust of the eyes. We buy things that make us feel good. It's the lust of the flesh. Or we buy things that we think will make us look good. The pride of life. But in the end, guys, it's just stuff and you can't take it with you. And let's say for a magical moment you could. If you knew you were about to die and you liquidated it all and we were back to the gold reserve and you could take everything you own and liquidate it and get gold bricks out of it. And if you were buried just right with your gold bricks, you got to take them to heaven. Let's just for a minute suspend disbelief and say that's the case. You know what would happen when you show up with your wheelbarrow of gold bricks, all happy that you get to take them to heaven? They would look at you and be like, oh great, more paving stones. Y'all in heaven, the streets are paved with gold. See, in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says, store up for yourself treasures in heaven, not here on this earth. One pastor put it this way, those treasures in heaven are people and praises. So what are you doing to leverage this short life you have here to make the most of what you get there? And I say this on purpose, this short life, even if you live 80, 90, 100 years on this earth, it is still short. I heard this as an example and it was too good to not pass up, so I'm going to pass it on to you. By trying to leverage what we have to make this life as best as possible for us, it's no different than taking a vacation and you're staying a couple of days in the Holiday Inn Express. And while you're there, you hire a contractor to come into your hotel room and put in granite countertops, a nice rain-head shower, marble floor, and someone looks at you like, dude, what are you doing? Oh, I just like to live it up. I don't want to do without. And they're like, man, you're going to be out of here in 3 days anyway. Why are you investing into this? This won't last. That's this life. Because when we get into the other side of eternity and we look back, the scripture tells us this life will be nothing more than like the wisp of morning fog. Even your hardest times, and guys, there can be long, long years of hardship that feel like an eternity. But the good news is in eternity, we look back, even our hardships will feel like a wisp of smoke. All right, let's wrap it up. So let's wrap it up by doing this. Examine yourself today and ask yourself, do I bow down to the idol of self? Or have I gone all in for the kingdom? Church, you see, when we start to become generous, we start to leverage what we have for the kingdom, there's a byproduct. We learn to be content. Paul himself talks about what the difference between pursuing riches and finding contentment. 1 Timothy chapter 6. Let's look at it together, starting verse 6. He says this, yet true godliness with contentment is what? Itself a great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into this world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. One pastor said it's like if you have a hoodie and a chalupa, man, you're rich. Verse 9, but people who long to be rich fall into temptation. All right, pay attention. And are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. Why? Verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith, and here it is, and pierced themselves with many sorrows. So what he says is this, if you're righteous, if you're living godly, and you have contentment on top of that, he says that is the true definition of being wealthy. But then he says, but look what he says about pursuing riches. Those who pursue riches have pierced themselves with many sorrows. Why? Because the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. You see, when you start loving money, it leads you to trouble. Now, money itself's not the problem. We've heard that taught wrong all our lives. It's not like money's an issue. It's the love of it that is. Because the more we find contentment with what we have, the less we fight to get more. And here's the crazy thing, the way this works in God math. The more content we are and the more we leverage what we have for the kingdom, the odds are the more we are given. Not to squander to finally fulfill these lives, no. So that we can do even bigger things for the kingdom. And that's exciting. Look at Proverbs 3, starting in verse 5. We know this, but I need to see it in all in context. He starts with this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. That's kind of what we're talking about today. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Look at verse 9. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. See, the more we have this godly understanding of how to use our resources, and the more we leverage those resources for the kingdom, the richer your life becomes. And this isn't prosperity gospel. If you'll sow a seed of $1,000, God will give you 10,000. No, your life takes on a richness. But here's the problem. I ask yourself, do I bow down at the idol of self? When we identify a problem, Jesus tells us in the Gospels, if a part of our body, he says, if your hand causes you to sin, chop it off. If your eyeball causes you to sin, pluck it out. And God's not telling us to go mutilate ourselves. It's an allegory. Do whatever is necessary to take away the evil from your life. And so if we today find that, yes, I have unfortunately made an idol of myself, and I see that played out by how I allocate my resources, then guys, maybe it's time to start taking some drastic measure. You want to dig out of it? You got to stop doing what you've always done. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. So if you always do what you always done, you'll always get what you always got. So if you need a change, take a drastic step. Maybe some of you today, you find out, you know what? God's blessed me with way more than I've ever needed. Great. I envy you, not because you get to buy stuff, because you get the task of finding out how to use the rest of it. Man, that's exciting. Take what you got and what's in excess and say, all right, well, how do I use that for somebody else? How can I leverage what God gave me for the kingdom? Let me just finish today with a word of encouragement. It's a practical example. Hopefully you don't hear this wrong. Let me just tell you from my own life, and I'm not puffing myself up. I just want you to know it works, okay? Since I first started driving when I was 16, only one time in my whole life have I ever gone to a dealership to pick out and buy a vehicle that I wanted. And even that one was out of necessity, not because I was dream car shopping. You see, in 2014, my wife and I purchased a small little 2010 Honda Fit because we needed a car that was more reliable and was better on gas mileage, because I was driving to Greensboro from Lexington every day for work. And at the same time, our daughter had been born, but because she was premature, she was in the neonatal intensive care unit in Forsyth. So I would go to work in the morning to Greensboro, go from Greensboro to Winston-Salem, spend the evening in Winston-Salem, and then my wife and I would drive back to Lexington at night, and we did that every day. That's a lot of driving. So we needed something more reliable than the beater I had, so we got rid of one of the beaters and we bought this one. But though it was a blessing, it turned out to be a burden for us financially, and it wasn't something lavish. Things were tight. And God helped us out in that. He sent an ice storm, and he broke traction at the worst time possible. There was no way to steer out of it, no way to break out of it, and it got totaled. It just, gone. No more payment on our hands. And so up to that point and after that point, I've always driven hand-me-downs and beaters for pretty much the most of my life, until just recently, God blessed me with the opportunity to finally purchase my dream car, the one I have dreamed about since I was in high school. But it's not a luxury car. It's 23 years old, has over 125,000 miles. It's full of rust. The seats don't move, and it rattles, and it has a lot of scratches and dents. Some of the paint's even missing. But I love it. I'm so happy with my dream beater, because it's what the car always wanted. You see, if you chase stuff, or you look for status and stuff, you're always going to find yourself just short of contentment. But if you're able to find contentment in, say, a 23-year-old beater car, where you can actually sit in it and smile because your dream finally came true, man, that's true. That's true contentment. Y'all, that's a simplistic example, I know, but trust me, the more you honor God with the things he gives you, more you'll find you have resources available to do even more work for the kingdom. And y'all, that truly is a thrill. Let's pray. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the truth of your word. If we're honest, we don't like it. I'm preaching it, and part of me doesn't like it. That's my sinful nature. I want to buy all the stuff. I want to eat all the food and travel all the travels. I want what I want. But God, that's just a selfish desire within me. And I thank you that you have promised those of us in you a new nature, one that is obedient, subservient to your will, one that seeks to obey you with all that we do. And so God, though we find ourselves at war, we thank you that your spirit is stronger than our dead flesh. So for when we have been selfish and given in to our selfish desires, God, we ask for forgiveness. I don't think any of us set out to worship at the idol of self. But more often than not, when we wake up, we realize that's what I've been doing. So God, forgive us of that. Help us to see today as an opportunity to do things differently. To rewrite how we take our time, our talents, and our treasures. And we figure out ways to leverage them for the kingdom, to bless somebody, to help spread the gospel, to support somebody who's doing the work of the ministry. Whatever it may be, God, awaken our hearts to the opportunities. Teach us contentment with all that we have. We see here in Scripture that if we live godly and we find contentment, that truly is real wealth. And that's what we want, God, real wealth. But that's the wealth found in you. So God, we need you to be our greatest treasure this morning. So rewrite our hearts and our minds. Draw us back into alignment with you. So that when we look back, we can say, yeah, he was my greatest treasure. And the way we act reflects that. God, if there's anybody here that has been awakened to a reality that they're in a pickle, God, and they don't know how to dig out, prompt them to reach out. Maybe it's through the QR code or the text, or to just grab one of us here in staff and say, I need help. Because we have people who have the wisdom to share to help those. And then if they do reach out, God, help them to be obedient in the wisdom that will be given to them, so that they too can experience this change of reality. God, we thank you for your word, how it's sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing down to the deep roots of our problems. Let us be obedient to it and humble in our receiving of it. And we thank you all for all of this in the name of your Son, because without him it doesn't matter. So it's in his precious and holy